Dr. Jean Tong, Wan Fu, Tong Wan, Lo, Day Gay.
The Chinese Exclusion Act was the first time any ethnic group was barred from coming to the United States. Undoubtedly, it was racist in nature. The act focused on laborers mainly, did not exclude merchants or diplomats or students. But that was the bulk of the people who were coming to the United States. So it made it quite difficult and resulted in a great reduction in the number of Chinese who were coming to America.
At 445 Jinling Way in LA's Chinatown, you might feel like you're stepping back in time. There, you can still find the law office of immigration attorney Yu Chung Hong. It's been preserved by the current owner to look almost exactly like it did when YC worked there from the 1930s to his death in 1977. A painting by his good friend, well-known Disney artist Tyrus Wong, is still mounted on the wall. A manual royal typewriter sits silent at a secretary's desk. The office is now quiet, but the work YC did there for almost a half-century continues to be felt to this day.
YC is responsible for processing over 7,600 immigration case files during his lifetime. So here at the Huntington, we have all those files, and he was a huge figure when it comes to Chinese immigration during the Chinese Exclusion era, when most Chinese were not allowed to come into the United States. But he was able to start a firm. He was able to become one of the first Chinese to pass a bar here in the state of California and make a living out of it.
According to his parents, Yu Chung Hong was born on May 6, 1897 in San Francisco. Because birth records were lost during the 1906 earthquake, several dates have been listed. Growing up poor was hard enough, but it would get worse when he suffered a childhood accident.
When he was just a few years old, his uncle was playing with him and threw him up in the air, as you may typically do with children. And when he came down, he missed him. And so he fell on his back. That was the cause of his back deformity and his shortness.
YC would only grow to a height of 4 feet 5.5 inches. Even his mother had low expectations.
His mother always told him when he was a child that he wouldn't amount to anything because of his physical disability. And so that was really, in a way, a terrible thing to be living with. And he never did forget that.
His father died when he was just a child, but YC went on to graduate from Berkeley High School and provide for his mother and sister. In 1918, they moved to Los Angeles, where YC worked as a translator for the U.S. Immigration Services in San Pedro.
Because he could speak, to my knowledge, 3 or 4 dialects. in southern China. And so he was working with the Immigration Bureau to translate these documents, to translate these conversations during the interrogation done by the American governments here.
To prove he was legal, YC was issued a certificate of identity. Only Chinese were required to have them.
Because the Chinese were not welcome to the United States, but there was already a population of Chinese Americans here in the United States, and they do have citizenship. And so one of the ways for the government to keep track of them was to issue special IDs to the Chinese residents here in the United States to make sure that they're legal. And so if you were caught without it on the streets, for example, you could be arrested and you could be deported.
While working for U.S. immigration, YC took night classes at USC, and in 1924 would become the first Chinese American to graduate from its law school. The next year he would get his master's. His thesis was on the Chinese Exclusion Act. YC was also the second Chinese American to pass the bar in California. He did so in 1923, a year before finishing law school.
Certainly the Chinese didn't have businesses that needed a lawyer. Their needs were really with respect to immigration. So I think it was just a natural an attraction to that area of practice. I remember his telling me that when he told his superior at the immigration service that he, along with everybody else, laughed at him because they said, "How are you ever going to make a living out there?"
But YC would prove them wrong, as he became the country's foremost Chinese American immigration attorney for the next 50 years.
His clients not only came from here in Los Angeles, not only from San Francisco, but his clients can be found in Indiana, in New York, and in the rest of the United States because he was so well known, and he was, for the longest time, he was actually the only Chinese-speaking Chinese-American immigration lawyer here in the country. I mean, there were other white lawyers who were doing immigration cases for the Chinese as well too, but he was the only lawyer for a while that could speak the language that immigrants spoke. And so people came to him. People wrote him letters from China, from the rest of the United States, whenever they have any sort of immigration issues they wanted to consult.
Realizing he needed help to initiate change, YC joined the Chinese American Citizens Alliance. Founded in 1895, the CACA is the oldest Asian American civil rights organization in the country. At age 28, he became the local lodge president, a position he would hold for more than a decade.
The ability for Chinese to get out from under this cloud of being second-class citizens, being able to immigrate and being able to have a pathway towards citizenship, to become naturalized citizens, really meant a great deal to our Chinese American community.
YC would lead a CACA delegation to the nation's capital to lobby for changes in immigration laws. Before he was 30, he would testify before a U.S. Senate committee, and later became the first Chinese American to be eligible to appear before the Supreme Court.
His mind was the sharpest, and he was the most important. He was the look-to guy. And he had overcome his handicaps, became successful, became famous, became a helper and a leader of the community. It's not important how you look, it's important what you do.
He didn't let the fact that he was Chinese, he didn't let his stature slow him down. He said, "I don't care. I'm as smart as the others, I'm as shrewd as the others, I know the law as well as others, I know it better than the others." It's not to say that YC found loopholes, but he found areas in the law that were not addressed that he felt could be used to advocate for his clientele.
Because of the Exclusion Act, many Chinese were only able to come to America by falsely claiming they were related to U.S. citizens. They were called paper sons.
As far as I know, YC was very conscientious of dealing with this kind of materials. He has very high moral principles, and those are the kind of cases that he would refuse and turn down. So as far as I know, that's not the kind of cases that YC will willingly take on.
YC would help those trying to immigrate by providing hundreds of commonly asked questions used by immigration officials during their long, detailed interrogations.
You had to answer all the questions by memory. So for YC's clients, he would usually advise them to devise a coaching paper where they would write down the questions that would be asked during the interrogation, and they would write down the answers about their own situations there. And so they would have to memorize those questions exactly.
Back in YC's days, it was extremely difficult because you did not have complete government records. Many things were done in China through traditional means of village customs. And so there wasn't the documentation as to marriages, as to births, as to divorces. Those things virtually did not exist. So having to put together an immigration case was very difficult in those days.
And it was the first time I realized how wonderful it really was to be born in America. Because I thought, I didn't know it was so difficult for people that wanted to come to this country.
Bernice Leung was one of YC's secretaries for 24 years. She's now 102 years old, but still remembers how much her former boss cared for the Chinese community.
He worked for the good of the Chinese, and it was important for him to do the best he could for them. There was no, he just didn't collect the money just for that purpose. He wanted to help. He wanted to help. A lot of times clients couldn't pay him. They would pay him either by bringing something good or, just what was considered valuable to them. In his life, he had experienced many difficulties too, and I think he had great compassion for people.
While YC did his best to bring people over from China, he was not always successful.
One time a client was so angry at Mr. Hong because he couldn't get his family over immediately. Well, there's circumstances. Some are easy cases, some are difficult cases. Well, this man was started to scream at Mr. Hong, and Mr. Hong said, asked me to just give him back his money. And I said to him, you did the work. Just give him the money. He said, I would rather have that than spoil my name, he said.
With his business established, YC turned his attention to finding a wife, and did so in Mabel Chen. A native of Portland, Oregon, she was among the first Chinese-American women to graduate from Oregon State. She stood more than a foot taller than him, but he won her over with his confidence, intelligence, and by writing her hundreds of romantic letters.
Dear Mabel, I think I can provide the Prince Charming the next time you come to Los Angeles. He's handsome, not quite tall enough, but he makes up for that in some other nice ways.
She had a very strong character. She was, she knew who she was and what she wanted and how it was to go, and you better do it, And he was a little more soft in touch, but still the same. He knew what was right and what had to be done. And so I think the two of them, that was the compliment that they had. They both knew who they were. And in Chinatown at those days, not too many of us knew who we were. We were all kind of struggling.
After a 2-year courtship, YC and Mabel married in 1931. They tried to buy a home in Los Angeles, but couldn't because of discriminatory land covenants.
So it was very, very difficult in those days for Chinese to own property. Well, his friend from the Immigration Service, Harry Blee, agreed to purchase a house of his choice and then reconvey it to my father. And that's how we had the first house on Gramercy Place in Los Angeles.
They would soon start a family. Nolan was born in 1934, followed by Roger 7 years later. YC's pride was apparent as he filmed his firstborn son being brought home by ambulance.
He was very generous and spoiled both my brother and myself to a great degree.
YC made sure his boys were proud of not just being Chinese, but American. Nolan joined a Boy Scout troop his dad helped organize, and celebrated the 4th of July by parading the flag around their backyard.
It was very important to him that we be truly Americans and assimilate into the American culture.
While YC spoiled his boys, he also enjoyed nice things. By sitting on pillows and having the pedals extended, he was able to drive around town in his Hudson.
I do remember him as a child. He was a striking figure. To a child, he was a striking figure. Because even though he was short in stature, he had a way of carrying himself that was confident, was open, warm, friendly. You know, he was always impeccably dressed.
We can just sit out there.
Some of his custom-made suits are stored at the Chinese American Museum in Los Angeles. Both he and Mabel believed it was important to dress well and make a good impression.
So this one I think is actually kind of interesting because I think it's one of the only turbans we have from her.
My mother thought that was an important part of being Americanized and showing that, you know, that Chinese women could really participate with anyone.
While YC did find a wife, that was not so easy during the 1920s when Chinese men outnumbered Chinese women in the U.S. by a large margin. To make matters more difficult, in many states it was against the law to marry out of your race, so many men went back to China to find brides.
YC and his cohorts, some of whom I've mentioned, were the ones that would conduct the lobbying, conduct the fights, conduct the strategy to try to get the law improved for Chinese so they could better bring their wives to the United States so we could reunify the family. That is when reunification of family became a core principle of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance.
U.S. District Court Judge Ron Liu was among those who benefited from YC's practice. After his parents had been separated for 6 years, YC helped bring his mother over from China in 1939. Liu was born 2 years later, and in 1987 became the first Chinese American outside of Hawaii to be appointed by the president to the federal bench.
I revered the law when my father said, "This is what I want you to do to help our Chinese community integrate with the mainstream America. This is what you're to do." So the influences of YC, I can speak volumes about, because it's people that you look up to. How can, forgive me to use the word, a little guy like that be such a powerful impact in taking care of so many of the community problems? That little guy, and I don't use it as in any way but good, small statured Chinese individual do so much for such a large community. I think it's just inspirational to me.
YC understood to change laws, he had to gain access to politicians. And he did, becoming friends with people like future presidents Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. He would invite politicians to come to his office and talk while eating Chinese food.
Because they recognized his position in the Chinese community, they sought him out as much as he sought them. He understood and recognized that you really had to deal with politicians in order to get laws changed. And so that was, in great part, the reason for his interest and involvement in politics.
Mrs. Hong would have tea parties for wives of leaders in the communities and just activities like that.
Judge Liu's father worked with YC to improve Chinese community relations with lawmakers. As a boy, Liu would type letters to congressmen for his father.
Dear Mr. McDonough, it was with regrets that you could not be at the party given for my mother, Wong Ah Mei, on her 80th birthday. About 3,800 persons attended the party, and my mother was very pleased at the attention shown her. It was with your good help that we were able to secure her admission to the United States so that the party could be given to her. And my brothers and I are very grateful for all your help. I became a lawyer at my father's direction to help integrate the Chinese community or any minority group into the mainstream America. Because when my dad was naturalized here in this court in 1951, he says, "We're here to stay. This is our home. Get our community into American mainstream."
Chinese American lawyers are not a rarity today, but if you look back 80 years ago, they were certainly a rarity then. They served as a bridge between the government and the community. Many people were scared of the law because they didn't know what the law provided. They may have had a history back in China, or they may have not always come the proper way. But having a lawyer like YC, who was regarded both by the Anglo community and the government as well as the Chinese community, was so important.
When Los Angeles tore down its original Chinatown to build the Union train station in the 1930s, YC worked with other Chinese community leaders to find a new site and helped design 3 of its main buildings, one which houses law office. YC also helped design the East Gate, which he dedicated to mothers, including his own, whom he learned to forgive. On June 25, 1938, New Chinatown held its grand opening. Unlike other Chinatowns in the U.S., YC helped make sure this one was planned and owned by Chinese Americans.
He had an idea of Chinese ownership, and that was something that was unique in those days because there again, Chinese didn't own property or couldn't own property. So one of the main objectives was to have Chinese people literally own the property in New Chinatown, as they called it.
With China on the side of the Allies in World War II, the U.S. finally repealed the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1943. But even then, only 105 Chinese were allowed to immigrate to America each year. Madam Chiang Kai-shek, the famous wife of the Chinese nationalist president, had lobbied Congress to end the Chinese Exclusion Act. When she came to the West Coast to rally support for China during World War II, YC was among those who welcomed her. He also met with Hawaii's Hiram Fong, the first Asian American U.S. Senator and the first Asian American to run for president. From 1949 to 1953, YC served as CACA's national president.
He had courage of his convictions. He wanted to fight. He didn't see being Chinese as being looked down upon, as was back in those days in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Even today, sometimes people don't respect the Chinese. I think what I kind of thought about this earlier, and I said, you know, what embodies part of CACA? Well, I think what YC did was he challenged, he advocated, he changed, and he advanced for CACA.
In 1952, when President Truman's Presidential Commission on Immigration was convening, YC was also part of that member as well too, so to try to let the federal government know about, you know, what is the best way to go forward when it comes to opening up the American immigration system. So that commission itself eventually led to the 1965 Immigration Act. That's the basis of our immigration system today.
On November 8, 1977, YC was leaving his office when he died of a heart attack. He was 80 years old.
Well, I think that he ought to be remembered not only as a pioneer, but he ought to be an inspiration to people, that they can accomplish things that seem impossible. Because obviously he achieved things that nobody would believe that he could accomplish. So I would hope that that would be the way in which he would be remembered.
Like his father, Nolan went to law school at USC and became a top attorney, while Roger, seen here on the right, also went to USC and became a well-respected architect. Before he died in 2006, Roger sold his father's buildings in New Chinatown, but made sure they were to a person who would respect their history and design. Roger also donated his father's papers to the Huntington Library, which is located near Pasadena.
I really wish that the legacy of YC would be remembered by having this collection here at the Huntington Library, so people can come use the collection, people can come consult the collection to know about the things that he did for immigration, the things that he did with Chinese American Citizens Alliance, as far as when it comes to lobbying for more immigration rights for the Chinese Americans, and also for his involvement in creating one of the first master plan of Chinatown in the United States.
YC's place in history is remembered by his buildings in LA's Chinatown and by reading his name on plaques. But his true legacy lies in the thousands of people who came seeking a new life in America and found it at 445 Jinling Way.
I ask that when you hear your country's name, you stand and you please remain standing until all countries have been recognized. Algeria, American Samoa, Argentina, Armenia, Australia, Bangladesh, Barbados, Bhutan, Bolivia, Brazil, Bulgaria, Burma, Cambodia, Cameroon, Canada, Chile, China. I'll give everyone from China a moment to stand up. Congratulations, you are all now U.S. citizens.